Greetings and welcome. It's February 25th, almost through it. Snow's still on the ground. It's really cold out there. And welcome to Public Works Committee. And all the way from City Hall, it's Melissa Tosi.
All the way, yes, thank you.
Welcome, Melissa. We don't see you over here in Public Works very often.
I know, thanks for having me.
You betcha.
So today I basically have a personnel rule amendment that's deleting an entire section. So personnel rule 22, that has to do with the police and fire payback program. It was implemented quite a long time ago, back in 2002 for police. And the goal behind it was really to try to keep our officers here once they've had some training. For those that chose to voluntarily resign during that first initial 2.5 years, if they went elsewhere, then the payback agreement gave us some ability to recoup some of that costs for training and background and testings and some of the uniform costs and that sort of thing. And again, it was for officers that chose to voluntarily leave to go elsewhere. So that was implemented in 2002. The firefighters were added to that in 2012. And so it's been a number of years since we have asked for any sort of payback. And we have never asked for a payback for a firefighter. The time frame for fire is 1 year, and it's just very unusual for a firefighter to leave within the first year. So we are requesting to delete this rule in entirety for a few reasons. One, the law enforcement in general has, over the last few years, really changed. And so we're just trying to get the best applicant pool that we can get. So any payback agreement or anything that might look to an applicant that would deter them from applying with us, we would like to not have that program. Just the lack of use of the program, I mean, it's just been probably at least 5 years since we've even looked at prorating some of that payback back to the city. We're just not seeing a need for it. The police department had made a comment that if an officer is struggling through the training program and they felt financially obligated to stay because of the payback and were worried that they would have to incur some costs back to the city, that maybe they would stay for financial reasons, which would cause some safety concerns. So that was another point that they brought up. And the fire department, in the last round of negotiations, they added a paramedic certification payback plan to their collective bargaining agreement. And that is really their focus, to get some of the paramedic certification costs back, opposed to a new firefighter, because they just don't really have the firefighters leaving within that first year. And let's see, along with this program, I also posted some general housekeeping amendments. If this rule was approved to be deleted, we would just have to renumber different rules, and we have a few errors in our table of contents that needs to be updated, so just general renumbering. I have discussed this both with the police and fire departments, and they are both fine with removing this from the personnel rules.
Tiki, any questions on that?
I just wrote a note to myself. Did you say then the paramedic portion of it is remaining, but the rest of it is not? Just the paramedic expenses to get them certified they'd have to repay?
Yes, so we don't have the paramedic payback program in the personnel rules. This actually lies in the personnel rules, but we did add that to the fire union's collective bargaining agreement, so it's specifically in the fire union's collective bargaining agreement.
Okay.
And that was their focus.
And both chiefs think this is great. Okay. That was all I had.
Dan?
I think this makes sense and goes along with Governor Little's program, that something about the paperwork reduction, that, and for every new rule, they have to get rid of two old ones. So now if we find one more, we can add a new rule somewhere. But anyway, no, I think it makes sense, and for the market, like I say, the market forces. So anyway, I would be happy to make a motion that the council approve deletion of Personnel Rule 22, Police and Fire Payback Program, and other general housekeeping amendments.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. I have a couple questions. So I was here in 2002 when this came through, and it seemed important, it seemed smart at the time to kind of protect our taxpayers' money. We're investing in people, and if they don't stay long enough, it's kind of like that. So you're saying the reason it's changing is because it hasn't been used, it's not necessary?
So the main piece about the payback agreement is that the employee's voluntarily leaving. So we have a lot of employees that might not work out through the field training program for a variety of reasons, safety issues, or that's just not a good fit for them, or they're just not passing the FTO program. So none of those officers would fall under the payback because it's not a voluntary, they're not voluntarily leaving. So we're just not, especially now, I think our police association and the employees, our compensation is, pretty good, and our benefits are good, and we're just not having a high turnover for employees that are voluntarily leaving to go to another agency because of the training.
Thanks. Okay, any other questions? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. On to number 2, consent, please.
Okay, so this is an amendment to the recent collective bargaining agreement with the fire union. There is a couple articles, an article with a couple different sections in the current collective bargaining agreement with the fire union that has conflicting language. So this is a little hard to explain, but I'll do the best I can. So in the current collective bargaining agreement, there is some language around a conservative sick use benefit. We tried to update the language with our current practice, which was to give them additional hours, which is in our personnel rules, and the language is not clear, and it did not meet the intent of what was negotiated. So to try to put it as simple as possible, there are 2 sections in the current agreement that we'd like to delete because they conflict. There's a section in the personnel rules that we'd like to delete because it's outdated, and then we have proposed language to add into an amendment. So the proposed language, if that's approved, we'd like to add that to the collective bargaining agreement and then delete the personnel rule language. So the benefit for the conservative sick use would be for any employee that falls under the fire union agreement, once they're above the for every quarter that they don't use any sick leave, they would be eligible, if they're a line employee at 56 hours a week, they'd be eligible for 6 hours of vacation. And if they are a 40-hour employee, so the inspectors, they would be eligible for 4 hours of vacation. So the way it's worded in the personnel rules now is that once they are up to 1,440 hours as a line person, they're no longer eligible for that benefit, and they receive a different benefit. So what this does is it is rewarding the individuals that continue to conservatively use their sick leave, so they don't, once they get to 1440, they would still continue to get that benefit as well. Does that make sense? It's kind of confusing. So the amendment would affect immediately about 17 fire employees that are not receiving that benefit right now. So anybody that's over the 1440 does not receive that. They would now, effective retroactively back to October 1st, they would receive that benefit from this point going forward for the life of the agreement. So it's 17 employees that would earn that additional vacation, which comes to, when you just kind of average out the hourly rate, it's about $12,600 in the fiscal year, and an additional 408 hours of vacation.
I have a question, just kind of the bigger picture is, what's the economic impact of this? Is there hard dollars, taxpayers' money? Is there more or less? Is it just moving it?
No, that's a great question. So the benefit is really for just the conservative sick use. So the way that we do that is if you don't use it in that quarter, we provide you 6 hours of vacation. So it's not a payout per se, but it is time off. So there is a value behind it.
Okay, thanks. Any questions?
Sure. I was, I'm just trying to get my head around how this came about with, you go through the collective bargaining agreement, you agree on everything, everything's done, and then you find a conflict. So do you all come back together to discuss it, to agree on the language again? And does legal get involved with that? How does that work in here?
Yes, great question. So the conservative sick use benefit that HR sends out every quarter went out, and the fire union noticed their names weren't on it. And so they came to the city's negotiation team and said, well, we had bargained for that extra benefit, but we're not on there. So as we started getting into the dynamics of the language, there was an extra sentence that they added that the intent was to increase that, and I thought it was updating old language, and it was just reading the language, and the intent was different. So the fire union provided us an audio recording of their first initial negotiation meeting that did talk about this ask, so it was mentioned in negotiations. And so in the spirit of negotiations, that we decided that the best move going forward was to just bring an amendment to the contract and move forward from there.
Okay, that makes better sense. I kept feeling like it was, they thought they had something that they really hadn't negotiated for, and then through clarifying language, they ended up with something. And so that's where I was going, was there, did everybody come back to the table and agree that this had already been approved, and it was a clarification within the language rather than an item, so.
Yes, the language gets very challenging at times when you think you're covering an area, but two people read it totally different, and so it can be challenging.
So they're good with the collective bargaining groups are good with this now, then?
Yes, so the amendment went to the fire union, which they thought the changes to that amendment looked great. And again, the one concern from them was, when was it going to be effective? And we would retroactively make that effective the first day of the contract. So we'll have to go back to October 1st and fix that first quarter of the fiscal year.
Questions, Dan?
Just comment that these kinds of programs to encourage, less use of sick leave and all of that are common, and I think they do pay benefits. So I think it makes sense that if it's if it's a good idea in general, why kind of arbitrarily cut it off at a certain point, especially for the people who are the very, some of the best at not overusing their sick time. So I'm good with it.
Okay.
So then I'll make a motion that council approve the amendment to the Coeur d'Alene Firefighters Local Number 710, agreement eliminating conflicting language and clarifying the benefit for conservative sick use.
And to be
Sick
real.
use, to be retroactively effective October 1, 2018.
Second.
Been moved and second. Any other discussion, thoughts? All those in favor?
Aye.
Thanks, Melissa.
Thank you.
Consent, please. Moving on to our favorite guy, city engineer is in the house. We're talking about streets. Oh, we're not talking about snow though, right? No snow today.
No. We'll try to not think about snow for a little while. So I'm here before you today to ask for signature on the state-local agreement for a project that we put together for the Atlas Loop, or the Industrial Loop Atlas Road Signal Project. And so that project includes a signalized intersection at Industrial Loop, and then also the Atlas Trail currently stops right here at this subdivision, and that would be extended all the way up to the Prairie Trail, which will actually make our Parks Department job a little easier by being able to get up to that trail instead of stopping right there or four-wheeling it through these lots. But, so this signal would be put in to allow left turns in and out of here, which is important because over the last couple of years, I've gotten a few different phone calls about traffic getting in and out of Industrial Loop, especially from the Tesh school that's in there. They have some difficulty getting in and out of there. So we found an opportunity with this grant, and we went after this grant. And as I mentioned in my staff report, we ranked first place in the state out of 92 projects. So we're pretty proud of that, and I think the reason is because we were able to hit each of the scoring points pretty well in the grant application. They called for things like letters of support, 3 to 5 letters of support. We got 5 out of there. We needed access onto properties or secure right-of-way, and I met with the property owners north and south of the project on the west side last year and got right-of-entry agreements signed with them so that we could use their property to construct this, and they'll actually get some nice driveway approaches out of it and things. And then lastly, the proximity of this signal to the existing Prairie Trail signal here was a bit of a concern. So what we did was we put in money into this grant application to coordinate these signals. And then we went a little bit further by coordinating the signal down here at Kathleen. So all 3 of these will be tied together to really decrease congestion possibilities out there when people are getting in and out of Industrial Loop. So if you have any questions, I would stand for them.
Dan, any questions?
Well, I have comments that I was very happy to see this. I go back and forth to work, practically every day that way, and so it is a real problem, and I really feel for the people trying to get out of there, and it could be a real safety stuff, because as you know, like when it's slick and all of that, and people have been waiting there and like, oh, can I make it or not? I'm going to try, and their wheels are spinning. So, yeah, I only have 2 regrets about it. One is that I can only vote yes once, and 2, that it probably won't get done in time for my retirement, but it's good for the next generation. So.
What a great way to look at it. Kiki?
I just had a few things, and I did chat a bit with Chris right before the meeting, so I wanted to touch base on those. But I'd asked him, because I was on General Services and I'm back on Public Works, so I missed some of how this works. And if I understand this correctly, how you apply for this grant is they release categories of grants that LTAC has, and then you find out what's appropriate for things that are going to work in with current projects and needs here, and then apply accordingly. So that was kind of one of my questions on, was there other grants that you've applied for that are along the same lines as this one? And then I also had, who designs these? Do you go to the engineer prior to applying, or do you do the in-house work to apply for the grant?
The plans were put together by Welch Comer Engineers. We have a line item in our budget for hiring engineers to do reasonably small projects, and so that's what we used on this. And then they helped put the grant application together. I went and got the right of entry agreements and secured some more support letters, things like that, and then they put them all together, send it over to me, I review it, and then it's submitted into LTAC for their scoring.
Okay. And then the only other thing I noticed that I think you cleared up in the agreement, it says that the funds cannot be used for local agency wages. And what they're referring to in local agency means the grant recipient, not agencies that the city would use. Is that true?
Correct, yes. That's to keep cities or townships or whoever from getting a grant and then doing all the work themselves and keeping the money. Because this is a little unusual case on this project where we get the money up front and then we spend what we can and then return what we don't. It's not like a normal federal or state project where we would pay for it and then we would submit for reimbursement. This one's a little backwards from that.
Good.
Just a couple of streets. So there's no real street improvements included in this?
Well, the streets will be sort of widened. I mean, so the truck traffic that goes in and out of there has a big off-tracking path, and so they've beat up the shoulder pretty well, and we've put a lot of asphalt in there trying to preserve that. Well, this will kind of formalize that and put in curb and gutter, make room for the left turn lane, and then put in real city driveway approaches into the properties to the north and south of this, on the west side there, because all the work is actually on the west side of this.
So there's curb and sidewalk, not.
Well, it will be a shared use path, a 10-foot wide asphalt path, just like to the south of that.
And so the northbound lane would have a left turn lane?
Yes.
You're going to widen enough to be able to go around and left turn blinking yellow?
Yep.
Okay, wow, that is a major for,
Yeah,
so it makes it nice with this grant, right? You can kind of
right.
build an intersection.
Yes. And this is I forgot to mention the timeline of this. I believe it was in the staff report, or at least it's in the contract, but it has to be done this year. So as soon as the state-local agreement is signed, we have to go to bid on this thing, get a contractor, and get it done this year with project closeout in December.
Nice.
It'd be nice to have that trail connected there.
Yeah, and a big intersection with a safe left turn lane will be going a long way. All right, look for a motion, please.
You're so excited about this.
Sure.
Thank
But you're not going to be around to see it.
Oh, well, I'm not
okay.
going that far. I will make a motion that council approve the state-local agreement for construction of the local highway technical assistance council, local strategic initiatives program project to install a traffic signal at Atlas Road and Industrial Loop and to eliminate a gap in the Atlas Trail.
Second.
That's a mouthful. You did good. Been moved and second. Any other questions, comments? As much as I'd love for everybody to see this, I put it on the consent, so you can take a night off.
Thank you.
Consent, please. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Sorry. Thanks, you guys. We appreciate it. Nice to see you, Mel. Come over anytime. With that, look for a motion to adjourn.
Motion
So
to adjourn.
moved.
Second. All
Yeah.
in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye, aye, aye. Thank you. Stay safe out there.